Well, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has denounced the World Bank's decision to suspend new funding. This is in response to harsh anti-LGBTQIA law. Museveni has vowed to find alternative sources of credit. Earlier this week, the World Bank said that the law contradicts its values. It says that it will suspend new funding following the introduction of the law in May. The law imposes the death penalty for certain same-sex acts. The bank has an existing portfolio of $5.2 billion in Uganda, although these projects will not be affected. But perhaps for more on this, we're going to be joined from Accra, Ghana by Robert Akoto Amoafo, human rights advocate, to weigh in on these developments. Robert, good afternoon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this matter.
Robert, this law sparked conversations around the world. Perhaps let's get your sentiments about the anti-LGBTQ law enacted in May by Uganda. Has there been a rise in violence? What are the sentiments on the ground in the country, perhaps also in the region at large?
Thank you very much. The passage of the Anti-Homosexuality Act has been a bane in the lives of a lot of LGBT people in Africa, not only in Uganda, because it is a discriminating law that sends violence and discrimination against a group of people that cause no harm to no group of people or persons. And therefore, people are suffering because of this law. As you may be aware, the law being passed has had a ripple effect on many countries. After Uganda passed the law, we heard from Ghana, we've heard from Kenya, we've heard rhetorics in Tanzania, Namibia, and so on and so forth. So which means that this law that was passed by Uganda has had a ripple effect not only on Ugandan LGBT persons, but other LGBT persons in other countries where this law is being considered. And a lot of LGBT people, even before the passage of this law, were suffering violence, discrimination, were being thrown out of their homes by their families, and people using religion and culture as a reason for throwing their children out of homes, and people being cut and killed because of their sexuality. And so the passage of this law goes further to cement the violence that LGBT people face, and also cement the discrimination that would happen to LGBT people across the continent.
Robert, thank you for those sentiments. You're right. What's happening in Uganda perhaps serves as a microcosm for the broader issues on the continent. I wonder if we could get into some of the systemic issues that we should also be tackling on that sense, perhaps in relation to religion, perhaps also in relation to narratives and perception and the role of other African countries on the continent. But also in relation to now that the World Bank has in fact taken a decision to suspend new funding in Uganda in response to the law. And President Museveni now coming out to say that he'll also find alternative sources of funding.
I think it's important that institutions like the World Bank do these things to prove to people their belief and their systems around discrimination and the values that goes with the funding they give. So if the World Bank believes in non-discrimination and it is giving funding to an organization or a country, it should also emphasize the need for such groups of people to respect that value. And I think that is exactly what the World Bank is doing, and we must respect that. It is about values. It's about looking at how their money they give to people affect the lives of people, either negatively or positively. So if Uganda is taking such monies and that money is not benefiting a group of people, and rather it is being used in a way to discriminate against people, then there's a problem. And that is why for us at Pan-Africa ILGA, we support the idea that every institution, not just World Bank, but every institution, especially governments that seek to protect the rights of LGBT people in their countries, should do same. So we are looking that now that World Bank has started this thing, the process will start with all other countries that are looking at protecting LGBT people and funding projects in countries like Uganda to send a lesson down to all other countries that, listen, we support you, we agree with supporting all other projects, but you don't use our money to discriminate against people or to let them out of the money that we're giving you. So for us, it's important that these things happen with institutions like the World Bank.
Okay, so you're alluding to precedents that this decision is going to set, given the value-based approach that you also alluded to. And I wonder at this point, if it is fair, given that there are some countries who also have harsh LGBTQIA laws, but they haven't faced the same scrutiny?
Well, they are coming. I don't think this was instigated by the LGBT community across the world. If you may be aware, an organization launched the call on the World Bank to act. And now that is going to be the process for every country that is thinking already has such laws. It looks like we were not awake to these things, especially when this thing happened in Uganda, in Nigeria. First, it happened in Uganda and now in Nigeria. But now the ripple effect is becoming too harsh on a lot of countries. And so it's important that we send a strong message and a strong lesson. The LGBT movement across the continent and across the world are awake and aware of what the anti-LGBT groups are doing, anti-democratic groups are doing, anti-rights groups are doing. And so it is very important that every group of people that support protection of human rights show this action to every country that has an idea of thinking of discriminating against anybody. Interestingly, most of these countries have signed to international covenants and international treaties that requires them to protect the human rights of each and every individual in their countries. So if there's no action from groups like the World Bank, then there's a problem that these treaties are signed and they are useless, or they are something that we don't go by. So this action is important. It should send a strong message to countries like Ghana, countries like Tanzania, countries like Namibia, or any other country that has started thinking about the opportunity of criminalizing people who cause no harm, who are people who are supposed to be protected, and people who are supposed to be given the attention that is required, looking at the kind of violence they face with the rhetoric of the religious groups, with the rhetoric of people who talk about tradition and culture. This is what we should be looking at and talking about.
Absolutely. Robert, just very quickly, how do we caution against misinformation and disinformation at this point, given the political dynamics unfolding?
It's important that we look at the source of our information that is coming. It's important that we pay attention to who is saying what, to ensure that whatever information that is given is from the right source and has the right person saying the right thing. So if we have information about the LGBT community, or we have information about what government is saying, each person should look at the source of the information and verify the information before we send it out or give it out to another person. It can be on your WhatsApp, it can be on your laptop, it can be by a phone call, what a friend said. It's important that you verify from the source, a credible source. If it's from a news website that we know this news website is credible, we should follow and listen to such sources.
Well, we'll leave that conversation there. Monitor developments live from Accra, Ghana. Robert Akoto Amoafo, human rights advocate, weighing in on the developments. We heard the World Bank now coming out to say that they will be suspending funding to Uganda in relation to its LGBTQI plus bill that obviously had been signed in by Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni. Perhaps also what this means for the country, the continent at large, but also the LGBTQI plus community as well. Thanks to Robert for his time here on the SABC.